let's look at one of the most important texts in philosophy, such that it becomes a discipline unto itself, metaphysics. Aristotle, 384 to 322 before the Common Era, was a student of Plato's. He was not an Athenian like Socrates and Plato, but came to Athens from Stagira in Macedon in the northern Greek mainland to study at Plato's academy, where he remained for almost 20 years. Aristotle was so well respected for his intelligence and ability that he was named the mind of the academy, evidently a significant distinction given that Plato was the founder of the school. Although Aristotle learned from Plato, he did not agree with all of Plato's teachings, and in many ways their philosophies are fundamentally opposed. Whereas Plato was primarily interested in mathematics and abstract truths as model and subject matter for philosophy, Aristotle was motivated by a love for logic and natural science. It is a popular image to think of Plato, the son of the aristocratic Athenian family, immersed in lofty contemplation of the abstract forms, investigating a subject matter like pure mathematics one can study without dirtying one's hands. Aristotle, in contrast, the founder of such scientific disciplines as physics, biology, psychology, among others, was perfectly comfortable scooping out sea creatures from a tidal pool, dissecting them, and examining the functioning of their parts, touching and empirically investigating those things of the world of experience. Of course, this is something that Plato disdained as belonging only to the changing realm of appearance or becoming. Plato's thoughts concern the objects in Platonic heaven, which is called hyperuranium, an unchanging world of reality or being, the world of the untouchable forms, of which alone, Plato believes, we can have genuine knowledge. Aristotle, of course, is more down to earth, absorbed in the things we can experience in everyday life. The differences between Plato and Aristotle in terms of their basic philosophical perspectives are illustrated in Raphael's 1510 oil painting masterpiece, The School of Athens. There, an elderly Plato with a white beard is walking beside his brilliant student, a more youthful, dark-bearded Aristotle. The difference in their gestures, such as you can see in this photo in the center, tells the whole story. Where Plato points with a finger toward the heaven, Aristotle makes a passing movement with the flat of his hand parallel to the earth. Aristotle indicates the importance of sensation for his philosophy in the very first paragraph of his work, Metaphysics, the concern of these discussions. Let's read this text. This is from the Penguin edition. By nature, all men long or desire to know. An indication is their delight in the senses. For these, quite apart from their utility, are intrinsically delightful, and that through the eyes more than the others, for it's not only with a view to action, but also when we have no intention to do anything that we choose, so to speak, sight rather than all the others. And the reason for these is that sight is the sense that especially produces cognition in us and reveals many distinguishing features of things. 980a to 20 to 30. We refer throughout to Aristotle's writings by a numbering system devised for scholarly edition of Aristotle's work by Immanuel Becker in 1831. So the numbers that you see here, 988, 20 to 30, are called Becker numbers, in contrast to the Stephanus numbers of Plato's texts. An interesting feature of Aristotle's statement is the claim that human beings desire by nature to know or longs to know. The implication is that it is our natural function to seek knowledge, perhaps in much the same way that it is a natural function of bears to hibernate in winter, plants to turn toward a light source, phototrophism. The anthropological perspective of Aristotle's opening sentences in the Metaphysics sets the tone for the book's entire project of inquiry. Aristotle begins with what we as knowers actually do when we try to secure knowledge. The answer is clear and diametrically opposed to Socrates or Plato's. Aristotle takes it for granted that knowledge is discovered and augmented by means of the senses, whereas Socrates and Plato deny that anything can be known among the appearances of things in the changing world of becoming through sense perception. Aristotle asserts that it is a sign of the fact that humans naturally desire to know that we regard vision in particular as intrinsically valuable, precious for its own sake, and not merely as a means to another end, a type of sensation that he believes we prefer to all others. The best explanation of these facts, Aristotle maintains, is that it is through perception and vision in particular that we naturally derive much of our knowledge. The contrast between Plato, the mathematician, and Aristotle, the field biologist, should not mislead us into thinking that Aristotle is any less a philosopher than Plato. The two thinkers are very different in their approaches to philosophy, but they represent equally legitimate philosophical methodologies. The starting assumptions with which they begin a philosophical inquiry, the questions they find important in understanding knowledge, and the existence and nature of the world, as well as topics in moral, political, and aesthetic value, complement one another in an interesting way. We can begin to appreciate the way in which Plato and Aristotle stand for alternative ways or different ways of doing philosophy when we look at such questions as what each believes to be the real world and the ways in which we can attain knowledge. Plato, like Socrates, is in some ways more dialectical than Aristotle. If we think of dialectic as largely a matter of following the Socratic elenchus, then we have already seen that for Socrates and for Plato, especially for Plato's early and middle dialogues, a proper philosophical investigation typically ends in an aporia or puzzlement. In the aporia, Socrates induces in his interlocutors a recognition of their own ignorance, of knowing at last that they do not know that which they thought they knew. This is the state of perplexity that prompts Meno to describe Socrates, for example, as a torpedo fish that shocks and numbs its prey into stunned silence. In the Meno commentary of this YouTube page, you can find this section. Aristotle, on the contrary, is more empirical in his mode of inquiry, and for Aristotle, a conceptual puzzle or aporia is not the end of philosophical inquiry, but only the beginning. If you like this content, please like, share, and subscribe to this YouTube channel, Samo't sa Simula. Thank you very much for bearing with me. See you again soon.